There was some discussion on IRC on which console is better for homebrew, whether it's the Nintendo DS or the PSP, and to tell you the truth, I think it's just retarded, like, arguing about it, because every single console has its own benefits and drawbacks to homebrew. In front of me I have a smorgasbord of Game Boy Color, Game Boy Classic, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP, and hopefully I'll get into some Nintendo DS later on, but for now I want to focus on some of the more classic hardware, and maybe get into some of the newer stuff. I'll give you a quick crash course on the flash cartridges, starting with the Game Boy Color series, which is over here. This is a 64 megabit flash cartridge. If you're familiar with episode 5 of Wargrabbing, I was actually able to put some homebrew code on here to use to transmit and receive infrared from my Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color does in fact have an infrared port. You can do some fun stuff with that. The Game Boys also have serial ports, so it's really good if you actually know how to code. You can actually use your Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Classic, or even your Game Boy Advance for microcontroller design, or a serial terminal, or a serial screen. There's a whole bunch of great stuff you can do. Now, to get code onto this cartridge, you need a programmer, and this over here is called the Game Boy Game Jack, or the GB Game Jack. The chances of you getting your hands on this dev kit are slim to none. The pluses are it works right out of the box. I can actually put an original game here and the cartridge in here and actually copy a game. Not condoning piracy, not condoning even backing up your own original games, but you know, this I use for development purposes. All of this is for dev purposes, not for pirating games. So if you have piracy intents, I really don't care. I don't judge. Just don't ask me how to do it. Now, the pros, it works out of the box. It's very simple to use. The cons, it will not work with Mac OS, it will not work with Linux, it will not work with Windows NT, it will not work with XP. It works under a DOS environment and the tools are poorly translated. Even getting the tools to run on a current operating system is a very difficult job. Even running on Windows 95 or Windows ME, you're going to have a hard time. Now you can go ahead and build your own programmer. I'll put some links in the show notes about building your own cartridges and your own programmer, but it's not for the faint of heart. In a little while I'll do a top-down view of some cartridges and how to modify them for your own development purposes. But if you're really into this, go to the show notes. I'll give you a lot more URLs and links to how to make your own programmer and dev carts, but save that for later. Game Boy Advance. These are two Flash 2 Advance 256 megabit Game Boy Advance cartridges. This will actually boot Game Boy Advance code. You can put it in your Game Boy Advance and put Game Boy Advance code on it. Whoop-de-freaking-do. The way you program them is you put them in your Game Boy SP or your Advance, and when you hold start and select when you boot the system up, it goes into what we call Multiboot Mode. And what that allows you to do is, using a third-party device via the serial port, load 640K of code into the memory and execute it. So using your computer's USB or printer port, you'll actually put a bootloader and transfer utility on the Game Boy, so you can actually program your cartridges through the Game Boy. There are other cartridges that go up to 1 gigabit, but I'm a big fan of the Flash 2 Advance. Mainly because they actually have this thing called the Flash 2 Advance Game Bridge. This allows me to put Game Boy Classic code on this cartridge, and using this device, boot it in a classic hardware or in a Game Boy Advance in classic mode. So you don't have to go and find a game jack. You don't have to go and build a program. You don't have to build a dev cart. You can actually go and spend the extra $20, $30 on the Game Bridge and have the backwards compatibility. So now this one cartridge, I mean, you can put so much code onto this cartridge. You can, if you actually did pirate games, you could probably put anywhere from 64 to 128 or more games on this cartridge, maybe up to 512 games, depending on how big. 256 is a fair size. I didn't feel I needed to go any higher. Like I said, they do go up to 1 gigabit. And I would suggest going and getting the Game Bridge and a Flash 2 Advance if you're going to go and do Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color. Not only that, but if you have a passkey, which I'll get into the Nintendo DS stuff later on, you can still boot code on your Nintendo DS with this very cartridge. So this will work for the Nintendo DS, it'll work for your Game Boy Advance, and it'll work for your Game Boy Classic. I see no reason why not to get one of these cards. There are better cards, but we'll get into that later. Let's go into a top-down. I'll showcase some of the fun stuff you can do with a Game Boy Color, and what you can do some fun stuff in Game Boy Classic mode on your Game Boy SP. I just want to cover real quick these 3 circuit boards I have laid out. These are 3 different Game Boy Classic games. I don't know what they are. I don't care. These two are called MBC1. They basically have some ROM and a little bit of space for save games. This is an MBC3. This actually has your ROM, some SRAM, and a real-time clock, the whole shebang. If you actually want to make your own homebrew cartridge, what you do is you go online, or I'll give some show notes, and you find out what is the maximum amount of code space that your MBC controller can handle, and what kind of specifications the memory requires. So then you basically pull off this chip, and then you solder in the replacement. It's not going to be pin for pin, but nonetheless, it will work. You put it back inside your cartridge, you put it in your cartridge, you program, you put it in your Game Boy, it'll work just fine. But like I said earlier, you might as well just getting a flash cart and a game bridge. Get Game Boy Advance mode, Nintendo DS if you've got one with a passkey, and it'll be backwards compatible with your Game Boy Classic. You'll have to forgive me, I wanted to actually showcase the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Classic stuff on a classic hardware, but because of the glare in the room, I can't get a good screenshot. Let's zoom into my, my Game Boy SP screen, and I'll show you this fun little utility that I'm running. If you can see this properly, this program's called Freakboy. Its main job is a phone freaking application. When I wasn't kidding that many of China has feared my pink Game Boy, this is why. It's a tone generating application, which I'll showcase in a minute. It does red box tones, blue box tones, DTMF tone dialer, and I mean that's it right there. I mean, phone freaking on your Game Boy. I'll actually show you how to use the tone dialer in just a minute. I want to show you a couple of other applications though. Here's a fun little application. It's called GB Remote, I believe. What it does is using your Game Boy Advance, not your Game Boy Color. Using your Game Boy Color, not your Game Boy Advance, because Game Boy Color has the infrared port. It'll actually record, store, and play back infrared signals. So you can actually use this as your Game Boy as a universal infrared remote control. Very useful for wargaming. Here's another useful little application. This is the Game Boy PDA. If you notice, it's got a phone dialer, it's got a memo book, it's got a calculator, it's got a date book, it's got a world map, it has a little memo pad. I mean, hell, if you got a flash cart, this thing only takes up maybe 256K of code space. Why not slap it on here? So you put on your bootloader, you put on your Freakboy, you put on your remote control software. This also has remote control software built in. So now your Game Boy Color is a PDA, a remote control, and a tone dialing phone freaking application. Okay, so far this is actually starting to get pretty interesting, if you ask me. Here is one of my more favorite scanning utilities for infrared called Infrared Investigator for the Game Boy Color. It does just quite that. It can actually scan, receive, record, edit, and store infrared signals. So you can actually go to a location, grab some infrared signals, bring them home to your PC using a special cable that you make, dump them, or if you have your dump the SRAM from your cartridge, pull off the data, and actually look at, investigate, and fiddle around with infrared signals. Another one of those really nifty-difty, handy-dandy infrared applications. If you have an RCX robot motor controller, commonly known for the LEGO Mindstorms robotic kit, you can actually now use the infrared coming out of your Game Boy Color to control your robot. I do believe some other toys use the RCX protocol. I think the Aibo might use it, and the Roomba. I'm not sure, but hell, now your Game Boy Color is a PDA, a phone freaking application, an infrared remote controller, an infrared investigator, and now you can go and use it to control robots. So, why not do this? I don't know. Alright, we're back at the project table. Here's my home phone. Here's my Game Boy SP, loaded up with Freakboy. There it is, just like I showed before. I've programmed it in, so it'll actually dial a local test number. Here you go. Get your DTMF decoders ready. Okay. Just to show you that there's no smoke and mirrors, there's no kind of camera tricks here. I'm going to show you Freakboy in action. go. Just to prove, no tricks, no smokes, no mirrors. I'll do it again. And dial 1718-336-9901 if you haven't picked that up on your tone dialer, on your DTMF decoders. Alright, shut up. Alright, the reason I use my Game Boy SP is mainly for screen reasons. I've got way too much glare on the Game Boy Color. Also, the sound processor inside the Game Boy Advance SP has to be one of the better ones, besides the original Game Boy model, the one that was made in 1989. So if you want to use a phone freaking application, use an Advance, preferably an SP. So to recap everything that I've stated here, if you're going to get into Game Boy development, I'd highly suggest getting a flash card, a Game Boy Advance flash card, and a Game Bridge. That way you're backwards compatible with Game Boy Color and Game Boy Mono, Game Boy Classic, and you can still load Game Boy Advance code, and later on you can actually use something called a Pass-Me on the Nintendo DS to go and load code onto these cartridges. That wraps it up for this one. In the next one, I'll go and try to cover some Game Boy Advanced specific stuff, and hopefully the one after that I'll do Nintendo DS. It depends on if you guys actually want to see it or not. Alright, so that's that. Check the show notes. I'll try to have some links on and some information about all of this fun stuff.
Hey guys, Pickle here. Welcome to Playing Games About CDs Part 2. Today I'm going to show you another program I found that makes it pretty easy for you to play games. And also, it seems to work with a lot of the newer games out there as well. The good advantage to it is it's 100% legal to use. You however, wow, I cannot talk this morning. You do, however, have to pay $10 or $10 to $20 depending on what license you buy for this program. And also, it requires you to have the CDs for you to be able to play this game, and you cannot share your profiles. So it's a very good way to allow you to play without your CDs and to have the companies not have to worry about their copyright being infringed. So I'm going to show you what it's called, Game Jackal. This is basically what the profile looks like. You probably will never ever have to go into this profile unless you want to get into some more advanced stuff, but I just thought I'd show it to you. So to create a game and make it a Game Jackal game, or however you want to call it, just right click on the icon of the game you want and go convert to Game Jackal profile. It'll then ask you what letter you want to put your CD in for the drive. Pretty sure it's F. It'll open up your CD-ROM drive and it'll ask you to stick the CD in. One thing that I would recommend is that you leave it in automatic mode, and also this setting here, you don't need to use it unless a lot of the files on the CD are required when you play. So the game that we are going for is Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas, which is pretty much one of the newest games out there, and it has probably the newest copy protection on it as well, and I just want to show you that it does in fact work on this one. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but it works. Works the first time I did it, actually. So now that we're in the game, we are just going to exit. Then it'll start its process, and it will, I don't know what the smart imaging actually is, but we'll let it do it. And then it'll also go through probably about a 10-minute cycle of where it actually, 10-20 minutes depending on what it feels like doing, of where it analyzes your media and creates this image and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna skip forward when we get to when it's done, and then we can maybe talk a little bit more on that side. So it has now finished analyzing a profile. Now it's doing what's called finalizing the profile, and this is the step I talked about that took a little bit of time. So it's going to be about 9 minutes, and I'll be back then. Okay, so it is done. We're just going to load Game Jackal, and my iTunes is being dumb. So as we can see, it's made a game profile. So I'm going to now take the game out, if it lets me. Close it. And we're going to run it. You can normally run it from the icon that you use to convert it. However, I'm going to run it this way just because Sometimes works a bit better for the first time. And we wait. And there you have it. Game loads perfectly without any CD. It's sitting on my desk and I'm staring at it. I did have some issues when I originally made it and I tried to remake it because I guess it had previous profiles in it. So I went into the folder and deleted all the previous like the creations of it, and then I just tried it just now and it's worked perfectly the first time. So once again, sorry for you only being able to see the top left-hand side of the screen, but it's where the menu is anyway, so you get the gist of it. So, there you have it. Just for information's sake, I thought I would show you the copy protection of that game it actually has, just so you have an idea of what you're up against, I guess. It's Rainbow Six Vegas. It's secure on version 7.3, which is, I guess, 0.3 of a version higher than what we were working on last time. If you got any questions or having some issues, just post on the forums. I'll see what I can do to help you out. That's it. See you guys.
Hi everyone, this is Codename Gamma. In this segment, I'm going to show you how to make an Xbox Restore CD. This is good for people who already have a soft mod on their Xbox and are not happy with it and would like to get Xbox Media Center and any other applications that come with a BSoD soft mod. So let's get started. Okay, now the first thing you want to do is go ahead and open up your Restore CD folder. It's probably going to come zipped, and go ahead and check the forums for how to get that. And go ahead and open up where you downloaded the soft mod. And in there, your NTSC folder will be a bunch of folders with numbers. We want to go ahead and open up this one. And then go into the folder 000 whatever. And then Files. And you're going to want to go ahead and copy your C and your E folder into the Restore CD folder. And replace all files. And let those copy over. And then we're going to go back. And then we're going to go over here to UData folder. And we're going to open that. And you want to go ahead and copy actually all of these over and not just the 3 I did. So that way, after it formats the drives, it actually copies those where it needs to go on the Xbox. Just in case it screws up, you can go back and fix it. And we're going to go ahead and open up our backup here. There you go, drive C, and this is an unmodified copy of my C, and I'm going to copy that over to MS dash. Okay, now we got all the files where we need them to go. If you have an alternative dashboard like Avalanche or Unleash X, you can stick it in here and there's going to be an option to replace Xbox Media Center. If you want to do that, you can. You don't have to. So now that this is done, we're going to go ahead and minimize that, and then we're going to open up Quicks. You can also check the show notes for this. There'll be a download link. It's not that big. It's like a megabyte to install. It's going to complain about FTP connections. Just click OK. We're going to go ahead and create ISO. We're going to go ahead and local folder. and point it to the restore CD. And we're going to click cross-link identical files and create ISO. And save this wherever you want, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and save it to the desktop just for easy pickup. And it's going to go ahead and check the CD, and it's going to compile this into XISO format. It's the same format that your games come in that the Xbox can read. So it has to be in this format. You just can't burn it to a normal CD and then be done with it. It has to be in the XISO format. This usually won't take that long to build the ISO file, so just be patient with it. And now that's done, it's going to say it's completed. And we're just going to click OK, and we're going to get out of it. And there it is on my desktop, restore.iso, and you can go ahead and burn that out with whatever program you have. It looks like I really don't have anything installed, but I'm going to go ahead and use alcohol. And go ahead and put the disk inside your Xbox and let it boot up. And it's going to get over here to the CD we just made. Now, as you can see, there's a bunch of options here: made, service, remodel, complete rebuild, install alternative dashboard, and install add ms dash. Now then, made service, you can see it's going to clean out. I made it so that way it cleans out as much of it as it can of the other soft mods, and then installs the BSoD soft mod. Remodel will basically go ahead and copy. It'll format C and then copy over your game saves to C, format E, and copy them back to E. Don't do it if you have the map pack because it's pretty big and there's not enough room for C. This one will format C and E drives and also get rid of all your save games, so if you don't care about your save games, this would be a really good option. And then there's install alternative dashboard. If you copied one to the folder, you can go ahead and run this option. And then install and add ms dash. That'll basically add it to the softmod package. And well, that's basically it. If you like this segment, please go to www.codenamegamma.com and check out what we got there. Also, please keep watching BSoD, and we'll see you later.
In this segment, I want to introduce radio scanners. It's a fun little hobby, and that's just about it. It's just a hobby. Unlike computers or cars, you're going to spend a bit of money on a radio scanner, and it's not going to turn the kind of profit you could get with a computer, because with a computer maybe you can do some kind of coding or repair work. Same with a car. Don't watch this segment and go, oh my god, I can intercept all radio all around me, I have to get the most expensive radio scanner. Don't do that. A lot of times if you want to go and buy a radio scanner, some of the features to look for will vary between different models, and I'll explain these three in front of me in a moment. You can actually go and buy them used. A lot of the scanner guys and amateur radio guys they take very good care of their equipment. So this scanner right here, which is a very modern Radioshack Pro 95 dual trunking scanner with 1000 channel memory and computer interface, as well as programmable search functions and, like I said, dual trunking capabilities, would probably run you about $200 retail. You could probably get it used for about $100. This is a Radioshack Pro 63 scanner. The frequency coverage isn't as great. This actually covers between 29 megahertz all the way up to 1.3 gigahertz with some gaps in the frequency bands, which I'll explain in a moment. This is a Radioshack Pro 63. It can go from 29 to 512 megahertz, of course, again with gaps in the frequency bands. And this is a Bearcat BC700A. This says it goes up to 800 megahertz, but it actually goes up to something like 912 or 915. Now, the real main differences between all of these scanners is their functionality and their frequency range. Now, having a scanner in your car, this is supposed to be a mobile scanner, having a scanner in your car here in the United States, in most states, is actually a crime without a radio license. If you actually have a receiving device that can pick up police, fire, EMS, and emergency frequencies in your vehicle and you're caught with it, it could be a night in jail, possibly fines, possibly jail time. So you've been warned on that one. If you do have an FCC radio license, though, you can go and carry whatever the hell you want on you, whenever the hell you want on you. Now, this is an older scanner. We got something called frequency bands. A frequency band is basically allocations of frequencies designed for specific services. An example, I know CB radio is between 29 and 30 megahertz. 6-meter ham radio is 50 megahertz to 54 megahertz. Remote controls for the garage door openers, security systems, and things of the such are 310 megahertz. Older cordless phones are 45 to 49 megahertz. 900 megahertz phones, the handset is 900 to 915, and the base is 915 to 925. I know pagers reside in the 800 megahertz range and the 512 megahertz range, as well as above 925 megahertz. I know there's trunking data along the lines of 470 to 400, and I do believe 75 or 78, 480 megahertz. Frequency band, basically it's just an allocation plan of what frequency is supposed to do what services. Anyone into amateur radio will already know this. This is something, if you plan on getting into amateur radio, you're going to have to learn. I'll put some more information in the show notes. I've already spent too much time on this. But anyway, some of the fun things you can do with a radio scanner besides just receive radios, you can also receive data, which I'll leave for a future segment. Now, this scanner, because it's older, it has lower frequency coverage. Like I said, it goes up to about 512 megahertz. Now, there are certain frequencies that are deemed unadmissible for interception. So, like things like in the 830 megahertz frequency band, there was the old pager data, not old pager, old cell phone for the AMP system, where if you were to intercept that and decode that data, you can clone cell phones. So they've actually blocked out certain frequencies. This sports itself as an 800 megahertz scanner to try to get people that are trying to do cell phone cloning to buy it. However, it's been locked out. In this, certain frequencies have been locked out, like 310 megahertz. It's supposed to be a security frequency, so you're not allowed to intercept it. Same goes for this one. This does in fact pick up 800 megahertz and 310. Now the difference between the three of these is this one here and this one here, you can unlock those restricted frequencies by doing a small hardware modification, usually by removing or switching around diodes or resistors. This scanner is all software and firmware control, where you can actually use buffer overflows to unlock certain frequencies. Unfortunately, the people that created these buffer overflows do not give information on how to unlock frequencies that could be used in a criminal intent, like the cell phones. Okay, so another difference is what we call the stepping. The stepping is basically the spacing between your frequency. So, example, let's say you have 1 megahertz and 2 megahertz, and you have a 1 kilohertz stepping. That means you'll have 1,000 different kilohertz. You can go in, like the increment that you can go through the frequencies. You have 3 common increments. You have 5, 6.5, and 12. Now these two scanners can actually pick up 900 megahertz phones in the 900 megahertz range. The thing is, this uses a 6 kilohertz stepping. This uses a 12 kilohertz stepping. So this is more precise in receiving on the 900 megahertz band. Now, this has actually been programmed to use the most common stepping on the frequencies. So, if you're on a lower frequency, like the let's say like an amateur radio band, maybe you'll have a 5 kilohertz spacing. But if you're on let's say a paging frequency, you might have a 12 kilohertz spacing. So this is actually hard coded, and you can, using some non-proprietary software, which Radioshack does not want you using, it will void your warranty, you can actually program this scanner to go and scan ranges of frequencies it's not intended. it's hard-coded into this, and it's hard-coded into this, which means if you do a physical modification to these two radios, you might actually break some of its other functionality. Another thing you have to understand when it comes to radio scanners is just with any radio, you have to have the appropriate antenna. I've already explained some antenna design about how your frequency will determine the wavelength, and the wavelength is directly proportional towards the size of your antenna. I'll put some links in the show notes about designing antenna. You also have to understand proper coax. These are not transmitters. They do not need to have 50 ohm coax. You can use 75 ohm coax, meaning when the cable or satellite guy came by and installed your TV in your satellite box and he left some cable behind, you can use that exact 75 ohm cable to run an external antenna from your scanner to an external antenna. You know what? That's enough lecture. This is going to be I'm trying to keep this a short segment, so I'll give you an example. This is my 900 megahertz cordless phone. Okay, Radioshack brand model, no thrills, no frills. Radioshack scanner. I'm going to turn my scanner on and I'm going to tell it to scan the frequencies from 900 to 925 and see when I can pick up this phone. So I'm going to turn the phone on. See, little red light, it's on. Scanner on, you probably can't see that, so I'm not going to bother. Okay, search. While it's searching, I'll explain something called... Okay, that's not my phone. That's my phone. Oh, wait, here we go. There you go, found the frequency. Okay, I could explain squelch. Squelch, basically, squelch is an internal filter that discerns static from signal. So when you're using a radio scanner, what the best thing to do is if you have a very strong signal, turn your squelch all the way up. If you have a low signal, turn it all the way down just before your scanner goes to static. That way you can pick up that low signal. Okay, that's it for that. Now, you can actually use, if you're regulated by the FCC, or the Federal Communication Commissions, whatever the hell it is, you can actually go to their website and go into their database and search their database. If you know the name of an organization, company, business, what the hell ever, that uses uses any kind of frequency, you want to know that frequency. Like, let's say you have a car service, or around here, the local 2600 people meet up at a building called the Citigroup building. I know the location of the building, and I know the name of the building, and just using those two query search terms, I'll show you how you can go and find the frequencies that the people in that building use. I'm going to show you how to go and find frequencies of known locations using the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission. If you're in the United States, you will be regulated by the FCC. If you're outside of the United States, just skip this part. Go to fcc.gov, and on the right-hand side, in the middle, you'll see bureaus and offices. Go to wireless telecommunications. Okay, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, or the WTB, has an online database which you can search different queries. Now, they have general menu reports, which we don't care about. What we want to know is the universal licensing system, because everyone, like every business, every amateur radio operator, all of them have to have a license, and that license can be searched, and they could be found. In this case, we're going to find out what organization, what company, what business owns a frequency. Now, we don't know the call sign, but we do know the name. Okay, we're going to go to an advanced search. Now, I know the local 2600 groups meet up in a place called the Citigroup Bank, or the Citigroup building here in the city. So we don't know the call sign, we don't know the service group, but we do know that it's CITIGROUP, Citigroup. We don't know the FRN. We know the city is New York, and the state, New York. Don't know the zip code. Everything else leave as default. License detail, all of them. Authorization types, all of them. Frequencies, all of them. And then just click your search. Now it's going to come up with some information. Now here's our call sign. Like I said, every single licensed operator or control point, meaning radio, needs to have a call sign and a lease ID. Now, both of these are active. Now, let's bring up some information on this. Okay, apparently it's industrial. It's in Greenwich Street, New York, New York. That is the address and phone number of the Citigroup building. Let's check out what frequencies it owns. Okay, 2 frequencies for the location. 464.75 and 469.75. Got 2 radios. Well, there's 1 unit here and 40 units here. Now, the one on .750, the 464.75, has an output power of 25 watts. That's unsafe for any handheld unit that I know of. However, the one that has 40 units at 4 watts, that is safe power output for a handheld radio. So this is most likely, right here, the 469.75 is most likely the radios for all of the janitors, security, and other building workers. And this frequency is probably for the repeater system. So if we tune in the scanner to 464.75, we can go and hit all of the frequencies going across all of the communications in the Citigroup building. So when there's a 2600 meeting, if we cause some trouble, we can hear security coming. Interesting, very interesting. This also shows that they could be using some kind of digital trunking, which I'm not going to get into today. But there you go. God bless the FCC. If you have just a basic name, city, and even a zip code of a business or some kind of organization that uses radio communications, you can find their frequencies and you can intercept them. This also goes for car service, pager frequencies, wireless internet services, pretty much anything that has a high power radio. You can go ahead and search with the FCC database. Okay, that's pretty much it. It's very simple. All you need is a little bit of basic information. You can actually, with some internet access, if you're regulated by the FCC, or just some common knowledge about the frequency bands, you can take a scanner and scan frequencies. Keeping in mind, I forgot to mention that if you actually intercept some kind of communications between cordless phones or cellular phones or private communications, that could be a felony in your country. Here in the United States, it actually is a violation of the Wiretap Act. So if you're going to go and pick up other people's 900 megahertz cordless phones, don't, unless you really want to get arrested. Another thing which I've just blatantly showed you, that 900 megahertz phones are very insecure. Do not spill out or divulge personal information, credit card information, social security, bank account numbers, or any of the things of the such while using a 900 megahertz or lower frequency phone. I'll show you a quick example. This is supposed to be my 5.8 gigahertz phone. This is a 900 megahertz scanner. My phone is on. My scanner is scanning. Right now it's scanning the 900 megahertz band. That's not me. Now I'll just cut over to when it actually finds it. Well, that didn't take long. The reason it was actually picking up all that static and garbage and crap is because the phone was actually too close to the scanner and it was like overpowering it. But just to go to show you that this phone, marketed as a 5.8 gigahertz phone, was just received on, well, I'm not going to tell you the frequency, I'm not an idiot. Bugger off. End of segment.
Lately there's been a lot of talk about Windows Vista. Some people love it, some people hate it. Personally, I think it's a great operating system. I think it's come a great distance since the first Longhorn betas. There's always going to be the argument of what's better, Windows or Linux or Mac or whatever else. Personally, I believe in the right tool for the right job. I'd use all three if I could. So today we're going to show you Windows Vista, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you buy Vista, I'd recommend getting the full version. I wouldn't go for the upgrade version. The reason why, if you buy the upgrade version, as soon as you upgrade, it basically blacklists your XP serial. And I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but if you have to format later and you need to install XP before you can upgrade to Vista, you're not going to get your XP genuined if it's blacklisted, so how are you going to upgrade and reinstall your version of Vista? Well, we know what they say on the box never really fits the system. So for system requirements for Vista, if you're going to use Vista Ultimate, you're going to need at least a 10 gig hard drive. I'd suggest an 80 or 100. I mean, it takes 8 gigs just for the Vista install. As for RAM, 2 gigs I'd recommend. I mean, I got 2.5 gigs on my computer over here, and it runs great. I got 1.5 gigs in my wife's computer, and it runs like shit. For a video card, over here I got a cheap GeForce 6200 128 meg card. It runs fine. The Aero effects and everything runs great. One thing good about Vista, during the installation, there's much more different types of media that you can choose to install drivers from. Unlike earlier NT class operating systems, like for example with Vista, you can install from drivers on a USB pen drive. Another advantage of Vista is during the installation it'll detect a Bluetooth USB keyboard or mouse, unlike earlier Windows versions where you were stuck using either USB or PS2. Media Player and Movie Maker in Vista use a proprietary codec, so if you record something with Vista and try and play it back on XP, you're most likely going to have some issues. Well, I don't have an iPod, but from what I understand, the first generation iPods, especially the first generation iPod Shuffles, have an issue with syncing up with Windows Vista. From what I understand, the newer ones really don't have that issue. Vista automatically assigns keyboard shortcuts to the program sitting in your quick launch bar. So if you hit the Windows key and like hit 1, it'll bring up whatever's first in your quick launch bar, or the Windows key in 2, and so on. Vista has some nice eye candy to it. Another new feature is the Aero effects. Aero stands for Authentic, Energetic, Reflective, and Open. I believe that's what it stands for. If you can see any of the transparent edges on the windows on my screen, that's part of the Aero effects. If you hit the Control key and the Windows key at the same time, you can flip through all your open windows in a 3D view. Aero effects looks great, but you're going to need a decent video card and lots of RAM. Sound Recorder has been rewritten and now supports recording clips of any size and length, and now saves in WMA format. Readyboost makes PCs running Windows Vista more responsive by using flash memory on a USB drive, SD card, compact flash, or other form of flash memory to boost the system's performance. When such a device is plugged in, the Windows Autoplay dialog offers an additional option to use it to speed up the system. When a Readyboost tab is added to the drive's properties dialog where the amount of space can be adjusted. Readyboost can also use spare RAM on additional networked Vista PCs. Well, if you've noticed the production quality is a little bit lower than normal, that's because I've been editing this segment on a Vista box, so that kind of explains it. I think I pretty much covered everything I can. Every time I think the segment's done, something else on Vista breaks, and I got to cover something else, and I just don't have enough time. But this is a general, let you know what the fuck's going on. I hope you enjoyed the segment. If you like train wrecks, I recommend trying Vista.
Here we have a standard Microsoft Xbox. I do believe this console version is 1.2. I'm going to show you the benefits of a hard mod, but before that, let me show you exactly what to do and where to put your chip. The Xbox is going to have some torque screws. One here, 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 and here. Basic use of a screwdriver. If you don't know how to use one, you should not be opening up your Xbox. Over here is the switches for my mod chip. My mod chip is an Executor 2.2 Lite, I believe. It allows me to have either two 256K BIOSes or one 512 meg BIOS. If you have two 256K BIOSes, you can actually select which BIOS you load from here. This is the write protect or the write unprotect from when flashing your chip, and this is chip enable disable. Over here used to be a very bright, ultra bright 3mm blue LED, which I removed because when I'm using my Xbox in the living room, it drives me absolutely crazy. Okay, once you take out those 6 Torx screws, it's just a matter of directly lifting your Xbox lid completely off. There are some smaller Torx screws throughout the inside. There's one here, I believe there's one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here. Once you take those off, again, you know, if you don't know how to use a screwdriver, you shouldn't be doing this. You can unplug your IDE cable from your hard drive and your optical drive. Unplug the power from the hard drive. Lift up the hard drive first. Unroute the cable a little bit. And as you can see, this Xbox is a dusty hell because it sits in my lab collecting dust. Yummy. Okay, then you can just lift the optical drive straight out and then disconnect the cable. Okay, it's a bit on the dusty side. Okay, it's really on the dusty side. And holy Jesus Christ, I'm surprised this thing hasn't caught on fire yet. Here's my mod chip right here. It quite literally just plugs right into the board. Try to unplug it gently for you. There you go. There's the pin header that you have to solder in. I'll zoom in and I'll actually show you the pin header itself. Let me just make sure everything's centered on screen and let me zoom in. Here's the pin header. It's a, I do believe it's a 2.5mm pin spacing, or 3mm, I'm not too sure. It's basically the same size as your standard IDE controller pin header. It's relatively simple to go and solder into your Xbox. Over here, this really tiny point is called D0. D0, when it's grounded, disables your internal BIOS, which is in my Xbox right here, and allows you to boot from the LPC bus, which is over here. Version 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 Xboxes do not have the circuit tracks over here and in various locations for this header. It might have the pins, but the tracks don't connect it. It also might not have the D0. So if you have an Xbox that's above version 1.4 or 1.5, I would highly recommend getting a mod chip that has an LPC rebuild. The LPC will directly fit over your version of Xbox, and it actually has these very easy solder points directly on a very thin printed circuit board. It's one of those, you put the piece of the puzzle in, and if you put it in wrong, then you're just seriously stupid. You can't screw it up. The best way of actually soldering this in is pulling the entire motherboard out, flipping it over, and then soldering in your pin header. The D0 point for some people is very difficult. The reason this is because the entire board, besides all of the spots that you have solder on, are coated in a coat of lacquer. Like this board is actually copper underneath. This green is a coat of lacquer paint. If you go and take a very sharp safety pin or a sewing needle and gently scrape the contact, what you can do is you can scrape away very gently the lacquer, revealing the actual copper pad, and from there you just pre-tin your wire and solder it on. It should stick like shit to a blanket. You can also solder in a wire header, where basically there's just going to be wires coming. Oops, sorry. There'll be wires coming out of here, but I chose the pin header because it allows me to quite literally just plug my chip in, just like that. There's also this point right here, which is your ground, which just goes directly underneath the screw. There's a small cable right here that goes to the front of the Xbox. Where is it? Where is it? Ah, there it is. That's out of focus. There you go. This is the chip I was explaining before. This chooses the bank of BIOS I want to use, my write protect, and whether or not my chip is on and off. And there should be an LED here. This just routes straight from the vent straight to the chip. Alright, that's the mod chip. You really don't need to go elaborate and get a very expensive chip, a most basic chip, as long as it has a 256K storage capacity. Most of them have 512 nowadays. An on-off switch, and the ability to run on version 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7 are the main features of looking for in an Xbox hard mod. Now let's go to the PC side and I'll show you some of the fun stuff you can do with an Xbox BIOS. Of course, we're going to need a little bit of software on the PC side, so you're going to have to go and get a copy of EVTool. I have version 1.0.9. There's probably a newer version out by now. And you're going to need the Evolution X M8 Plus BIOS. The Evolution X M8 Plus BIOS is one of the better BIOSes for the Xbox. It supports pretty much every single version of Xbox, and it's got a whole bunch of nifty, handy-dandy features. Once you actually download EVTool and the Evolution X M8 Plus BIOS, you can go to xbox-scene.com or xbins.org and figure out where you can get these from. Once you have EVTool up and running, what you're going to have to do is open your BIOS. And we're going to go and point this to the M8 Plus. Now, whether you want to, if you have a 256, a 1 meg, a 512, whatever. Now, I have let's just say I want to do a 256. Okay. You can change the animation colors, like not the animation, but the logo color of the Xbox logo to whatever you want. I'll show you that in a little bit. The default fan speed, LBA48 support. LBA48 means if you have LBA48 support, you can support drives well above 138 gigabytes. I believe you can go up to 1 terabyte. You can also ignore hard drive partition tables, which will be okay for most of the time, but if you're actually having issues with your hard drive going past LBA48 support, you might want to check that. And what properties your LBA48 drive will have well, you can use a standard partition table where you'll have an F drive and a G drive. You can have partition 6, which is the F drive, takes up the entire drive, which is, I think, is the more applicable thing to do. Or have partition 6 is non-LBA48, however partition 7 goes past that 138 gig boundary. Or I'm a standard, I don't have LBA48 support, all I can support is up to 138 gigabytes. Okay? Let's use partition 6 takes the rest of the drive. I like that one the most. Okay? There's a BIOS MD5 hash, which can be used when configuring some of the dashboards to identify what BIOS you're using. You can turn off the Xbox flubber animation. I hate that animation. It takes so long for the damn thing to actually boot up. You can remove the Xbox logo. I don't like the trademark symbol. Screw you, Microsoft. Fuck your trademark. You can do the splash logo at the bottom of the screen that says Microsoft. You can take that out. DVD drive check. Now this is actually good because a lot of people who have modded their Xboxes don't even use the optical drive anymore. They just play all their stuff, or all their homebrew and all their apps straight off the hard drive. If you want to check this, your Xbox will no longer give you an error if your optical drive is either dysfunctional or not hooked up. In fact, you can actually plug in a second hard drive. Evox logo. You can have a 128 by 128 24 color. I do believe it's a 24 color bitmap logo in the top left corner of the screen. This is called an Evox logo. You can change this to damn near anything you want. The boot partitions and executables. This basically tells your BIOS what you want to actually boot in what order, like what actual Xbox executable. So from the DVD-ROM drive, you want default.xbe. Leave that alone. All games have default.xbe. The first thing you want to, what is the first thing you want to boot? Maybe you want to boot, the Evox, the Evolution X dashboard, Avalanche, or Next Gen. Change it to whatever you want. Hell, you can even make this. You can make this Evox. You can make this what do you call it? Xbox Media Center, and you can make this your favorite emulator. So if this fails and this fails, it goes to this one. Contingencies. What color you want your power LED to be? You can have it red, green, orange, off, or cycle between them. I like leaving it green because the Xbox itself will give you something called a frag code, flashing red and green, to determine to show you an error status code. If you do the cycle, you can actually choose what stages you want it to do. In-game reset, or IGR, you can either do more compatible or quick. I like the more compatible. It maybe adds an extra 2 seconds, but it's more compatible. You can save your preset, so if you have custom logo, colors, and all of this, you can save your current preset and apply it to multiple BIOSes. If you have an embedded hard drive key, you can place it in here. Once this is done, you save it as. There we go. Fox brand sticky M8 plus 256K BIOS. Save it. It exports. You're done. Program this to your Xbox chip however deemed necessary. You can do it through your dashboard. You can do it through a programmer. I don't know. If you got some kind of magical monkey that can spit code out of his ass into an LPC bus, use that. Here's my standard Xbox, version 1.2, I believe I've stated already. There's my TV. The reason I'm doing this like this is because I don't want to hook the Xbox up to the computer, and I want to show you that this isn't some kind of just bullshit camera tricks, smoke, and mirrors. Okay, we're going to boot up the Xbox. My mod chip should be off. And there's the standard Xbox loading screen. Now, some of the benefits that of a mod chip is, well, I've already covered that, you can easily upgrade your hard drive. You don't have to use a hard drive, locked hard drive. You don't have to actually have the optical drive functional. You can even remove it and put in another hard drive. Now I'm gonna go and turn my chip on, and I'll show you the modified BIOS. Notice I changed the color to blue. Matches the color scheme in my living room. Very Martha Stewart. And it's gonna directly boot into Evolution X, which is a dashboard. You can also, like you've seen from the PC side, you can also make that Xbox Media Center or what the hell ever. I also sport the in-game reset, which is an M8 BIOS feature. That's pretty much it. I mean, you can go and buy pretty much any single Xbox mod chip. You can get it for $10, you can get it for $50. As long as you can hold one 256K BIOS, you're pretty much set. When your chip comes in the mail, you hook it up to your Xbox, it'll have something called the Cromwell Flash ROM, which is basically an HTTP server. And what it does is you plug your Xbox into your home network, and you can actually log in via HTTP to program it with the BIOS that you've programmed. It's really simple. I would definitely go and do a hard mod over a soft mod any day, because you don't have to fiddle with exploits, you don't have to fiddle with configs, you don't have to worry about actually getting your hands. I mean, if you actually want to go out right now and buy a copy of Mech Assault, Splinter Cell, 007, what the hell ever, you're going to spend more money on that game. Even if it's used, it's going to be more money on that game than it is on a chip. You might as well go and break the bank and get the chip.